Hi everyone, Caoimhin here from MTU's Blackrock Castle Observatory. In this video, we are going to be taking a look at the planet Mercury. So Mercury is a very interesting planet. It's the smallest planet. It's the closest to the sun. It's a rocky planet, but it's very small, so it doesn't really have much in the way of an atmosphere. And even though it's the closest to the sun, it's not the hottest. It's got the shortest year, just 88 days. There's a lot of quite interesting facts about Mercury, but it's also one of the most frustrating planets in terms of actually observing it. Because Mercury is so close to the sun, we always see it very close to the sun. And you may have seen some of this already from the Twitter video that we posted earlier this week, but in this video we're going to take an even closer look at Mercury. So make sure to like the video and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're interested in these kinds of topics, and make sure to click the little blue bell icon to get all of the most up-to-date notifications. So here's Mercury, as it will appear a bit after 10 o'clock. This is this evening. We'll take a look at tomorrow evening just to give us all a bit of time. Mercury, as I mentioned, very close to the sun. So we always see it very close to the horizon, either just ahead of the sun at sunrise or just before the sun's, or just after the sunset at sunset. So Mercury is just here very close to the horizon, and because it's so low, it can easily be blocked out by things like trees. Whenever you take a look at Mercury through a telescope, you're going to be suffering some atmospheric extinction. There's going to be some extra haze here because of the part of the atmosphere we're looking through. Over the next few days, Mercury will get a little bit higher into the sky. There we go. And then it will come back down again and disappear in front of the sun very quickly. Because its year is just 88 days, we normally only get to see it for a couple of weeks at most. When Mercury is sticking out at its furthest from the sun, we call that its greatest elongation. There is an extra way to check when its greatest elongation is. It's when we see Mercury as a half. So here we are about the 13th, 12th, 13th. That's when Mercury will be sticking out its furthest from the sun. If you imagine that Mercury, the sun, and the Earth were three different corners of a triangle, when Mercury is like this, the triangle is a 90-degree triangle. It's a right angle triangle with a right angle forming between the Earth and the sun, and then Mercury out at the side. So this angle will change as Mercury comes in front of the sun, and then we get pretty much to a straight line. And of course, when Mercury is going around the other side of the sun, it's pretty much a straight line as well. So its greatest elongation is when it sticks out the furthest, and its greatest elongation this month is going to be its greatest eastern elongation. And even though we're looking at Mercury over in the west, if you imagine the sort of sphere of the sky, if we come all the way back here and get a really distorted view, Mercury is more easterly, closer to the east than the sun, technically. And that's because it's sticking out further that way. So it takes longer for Mercury to sink down into the west, so we see it in the west. We get the opposite effect when we're looking for Mercury in the morning sky. Early in the morning, you see Mercury at its greatest western elongation because it's sticking out further west than the sun that will be following it as it rises in the east. So that may seem a little backwards and complicated, but it really is Mercury's greatest eastern elongation because it is east of the sun, and we're talking really from Mercury's perspective. So again, if we take a closer look at Mercury as we did when we were seeing it go through its phases, which is something we can do with planets like Mercury and Venus that are closer to the sun, we can see that it's got plenty of craters, it's got some scars and cracks on its surface. Because Mercury is so small, as I mentioned, it doesn't really have much in the way of an atmosphere. This means that it doesn't trap much heat during the day. Even though it does get incredibly hot here under the light of the sun, it doesn't trap that heat the way Venus does with its thick atmosphere. So Mercury during the day is a few hundred degrees cooler than Venus, but at nighttime it drops down as cold as the moon at nighttime, minus 150 or so degrees Celsius. So it's got a really big change from its hot day to its cold night, and this causes the rocks to expand and contract, and this kind of stress causes a lot of these cracks and fissures on the surface. But also, it does have quite a few craters similar to our moon because there's no atmosphere to burn up anything as it crashes into the planet. And once it does create a crater, there's no wind or weather to wipe it away. So we have this, scarred, cratered, grey, rocky ball orbiting around the sun. It is a bit bigger than our moon, but it is, pretty small. It is the smallest planet. Once you start going smaller than Mercury, you're talking about dwarf planets like Pluto. So Mercury now has the crown of the smallest planet, as well as the closest to the sun and the shortest year. So Mercury's got quite a lot of extreme things about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back to the middle of the day just to get an idea of how Mercury moves around the sun. So we're here pretty close to the middle of the day. Yeah, the sun's pretty much above the south. So from the moon or from Mercury or from the International Space Station, anywhere where you're not surrounded by atmosphere, you can see the planets, the sun and the moon all together in the sky with all of the stars. In Stellarium, you can get rid of the stars, which does make it a little bit easier to focus on things like the planets and the moon. So if we start going through a few days here, you'll see Mercury pushes out a little bit from the sun, gets to its greatest elongation around here, and then it starts coming around in front of the sun. So even by there, Mercury is behind Venus. We're not going to see it. Although it may be a little above or below Venus, it is. So that could present a very good view if you've got an incredibly clear horizon. By this time of the month, we're not really going to be able to see Mercury that well at all. But it will continue to move in front of the sun. Even by here, it's not going to be in a dark enough portion of the sky to be seen. It's right in front of the sun, and then it starts coming out the other side. So you can see from its greatest elongation east in the evening up to its greatest elongation west, that's half of its year, and it's not a very long time for us here at all. So you can see Mercury at both sides of its elongation. However, it is easier to see at some times of the year than the other. Very often we're going to get a slightly better view of Mercury in summertime, or at least this time of year, because of the way we're angled towards the ecliptic. So we'll bring back the stars. I like the stars. I don't want them missing from the sky for too long. And we're also going to bring up the line of the ecliptic. So the ecliptic is where we see eclipses. So it's where we and the other planets orbit the sun pretty much. There is a bit of variation, and of course the moon, it crosses the ecliptic every month, but only sometimes does it cross directly behind or in front of the sun, giving us an eclipse. So I'm going to have to keep changing the time, so we stay roughly around sunset as we go through different parts of the year. But you'll see here that the angle changes. This line looks a little bit higher at certain times of the year and a little bit lower at other times of the year. And that means we're going to be able to see Mercury when it's almost above the sun, when the line is at a certain angle, but it's going to be harder to see Mercury when this line is at a much lower angle in the sky. That's going to mean Mercury is lower in the sky and potentially blocked out by objects on the horizon. So it doesn't just vary from month to month and from one side of Mercury's orbit to the other, but it does also vary how visible Mercury is with our year and our position around the sun. So this time of year, it's May, we've got reasonably good weather, we don't have too many clouds. This is going to be a reasonably good time of year in which to try and see the smallest planet. And because Mercury is the smallest planet, the closest to the sun, the shortest year, because it's all of these very, very difficult things, it gives you a certain degree of bragging rights. If you say, oh, I saw Mercury, with my eyes, or I managed to take a closer look at Mercury with a telescope, that's something you can kind of brag about and tell other people. So here we go with quite a powerful telescope. You get to see a degree of Mercury's phase here on the 10th. Let's see if we can keep an eye on that over a couple of days. Yeah, there we go. So we can see it just barely going through these phases, even with, reasonably large telescope. You do need quite a large telescope to take a look at this tiny planet. But as I said, even seeing it with just your eyes gives you those bragging rights, and you can show off to other people that you've seen this planet that is widely regarded as the hardest of the planets that are visible with the naked eye to actually catch. So I hope you get a chance to see that over the coming day.